One of the scariest things for many homeowners when they're thinking of selling a home is to be stuck in a contract with someone they no longer want to deal with. This happens a lot. So today I'm going to help answer the question, can a home seller back out of a contract with a buyer? And we're going to get started right now. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to All Things Knoxville with me, Ben Barreto, your local real estate pro and relocation expert for East Tennessee. Before we jump into today's video, I want to remind you that I make videos like this every single week. So if you're interested in learning more about Knoxville, if you're interested in learning more about real estate, buying, selling, and investing, please make sure to hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and maybe share this video. It's a very simple thing that you can do that really helps me grow my channel and reach a broader audience. Lastly, if you are thinking of moving to East Tennessee, or if you're in East Tennessee thinking of buying, selling, or investing, please give me a call. If you got questions about real estate, if you need more information on a house, I've got the answers. Just all you need is a great realtor to have your back, and I'm standing right here. So give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, go to my website and sign up. I love helping people in this industry, and I would love to help you too. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into today's video topic. So it's sometimes possible for a seller to back out of an accepted offer on a house. However, it's not very common, and to be honest, it's quite tricky to do. There are only a few situations that allow sellers to back out legally, and backing out the wrong way could have some serious legal consequences. I recommend consulting with a local realtor in your area if you're not here in Tennessee. Talk to a realtor or a qualified real estate attorney before you try to put any of these steps into action. But in this video, I'm going to explain the legal ways that you can get out of an accepted offer. But again, be sure to check back. Today, I'm going to explain some legal ways that you can get out of an accepted offer. But be sure to check back in the coming weeks, because I'm also going to discuss which tactics to avoid and to stay out of altogether so you stay out of trouble. And also what to do if a seller has some major doubts about after they accept an offer. Now, first off, how sellers can get out of a contract or an accepted offer on a house. First thing you want to do is that home sellers they have three ways to get out of a signed real estate contract. One is to take advantage of any legal provisions in the contract or already contingencies that are already in place. Another option is proving that the buyer committed fraud. You can also try persuading the buyer to agree to cancel the contract. Once signed, a purchase agreement is a legally binding contract. Parties are only released when either the sale is complete, one party uses an exit clause to terminate the contract altogether, or both parties agree to modify or cancel the contract. Quick important note. A purchase agreement only becomes legally binding when it's signed by both parties, both the buyer and the seller. A verbal or a handshake agreement is not usually going to be enforceable in a real estate transaction. Just remember that, those of you old school folks out there. So in other words, the seller can't simply tell the buyer that they changed their mind and walk away. Sellers should only attempt to cancel a purchase agreement if it's absolutely necessary, or they have a sound legal avenue to escape the sale. Using the wrong tactic to get out of a sale or cutting corners when attempting to use valid ones could quickly land sellers in a legal minefield. Let's talk about some valid reasons sellers could terminate a contract. Now, assuming the buyer holds up their end of the bargain, it's very difficult for sellers to back out of a purchase agreement. That said, there are three possible scenarios that allow a seller to terminate a contract, even when the buyer wants to follow through with the sale. The first one is the contract includes language that authorizes the seller to cancel under certain conditions. Second is the buyer violates specific terms of the contract. And third, the seller can prove that the buyer committed fraud. Now, first let's talk about a seller backing out of the contract using contingencies. The most straightforward way for sellers to back out of a signed contract is to exercise a contingency or a clause in the agreement that allows one or both parties to walk away. under certain conditions. The hitch is that sellers often don't have this option. The fact of the matter is most contingencies in a purchase agreement protect one side, the buyers. For example, an offer might be contingent upon finding a home, inspection, or ability to secure financing. Those are buyer contingencies. While seller contingencies are somewhat rare, they do exist, particularly in high competitive markets. So usually these contingencies are either going to be added or they're part of the buyer's contingencies, but there is some protection in there for the seller. Here are a few common contingencies sellers can use to legally terminate a signed contract. If the buyer fails to provide proof of funds or a pre-approval letter and show that they've started the loan, if the buyer fails to provide proof that they've started the loan qualification process or they fail to provide proof of funds in the time provided. If the parties fail to come to an agreement over an inspection repair is another option. You can also add some contingencies that must be met in certain time frames, or you as the seller have the right to walk away. Maybe, for example, the buyer has to sell their house and you only give them 30 days to get their house on the market and to receive an acceptable offer, or else you can walk. There's other things you can do. Just be creative, but be honest and run it by your realtor or a real estate attorney. The second way we discussed was if a buyer breaches the contract agreement. So this is pretty uncommon. Though uncommon, the seller may be able to break out of a sale if the buyer violates specific terms in the agreement. This is called making a breach of contract. It kind of connects with the first part we were talking about. An example of this would be if the buyer violates, examples of buyer violations that may authorize the seller to terminate the contract include missing a deadline to make their escrow deposit, not informing the lender or the seller of changes to their financial situation that could prevent them from securing the loan, or getting a new loan that could cost the seller more money than the original. State law and the contract itself dictate that when and how a seller can terminate a purchase agreement based on a buyer's breach of contract. Typically, the seller must give a formal notice to the buyer that they're in breach and then wait several days to see if they comply. Only after that can a seller walk away. Most states require that the seller do the following when there is a breach of contract. One is you deliver a notice to buyer to perform, and then give them 2 days to comply with that contract. Long story short, sellers can't back out if the buyer misses a deadline by a few minutes or even a day. They must be able to prove the buyer willfully violated the contract, which requires time to go through the proper legal channels. Before moving forward, I wanted to point out last week's video. In that video, I talk about when a seller gets paid and how they get paid when selling their house. There's also some bonus content in there, so make sure to watch. You can click right here or follow the link in the description. The third thing we discussed was if you could prove that the buyer defrauded the seller. In extremely rare cases, a court may void a real estate contract if the seller can prove the buyer defrauded them. Just like it's illegal for sellers to lie about the condition of their house, buyers may not use fraudulent practices or fake information to trick someone into signing a purchase agreement. For example, a buyer could provide the seller with a forged pre-approval letter or a fake proof of funds in order to get the house under contract. There are other examples that I could get into, and maybe we'll do that in a future video. But at the end of the day, do your homework. Make sure your realtor is doing their homework so that you don't end up in a situation where you have to use the court to get out of a contract. It also helps just to have a knowledgeable agent that comes from a brokerage with a lot of experience to know different ways to get around contract terms. Well, listen, that's it for this video. It was a little short, a little sweet. Thanks so much for watching and stopping by. It is always a pleasure to do these videos for you. And as always, if you need anything, give me a call. And until next week, bye-bye.